My name is Nick Park. I'm Executive Director of Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and this is our weekly video message entitled It's Friday but Sunday's Coming. A few days ago I opened up my Twitter feed and there was a quotation, supposedly from Dwight L. Moody. "Lighthouses shine, they don't sound horns." At first I thought, wow, that's a great quote, and I can see what he's saying, that we need to live lives of holiness and truth and love that are going to be so shine the gospel that even people won't even need to hear what we say in order to be attracted to Jesus. And that sounds great. And then I realized there was a bit of a problem with that quotation. So I decided to check and see if it really was Moody that said it, because sometimes, both in the secular world and in the religious world, we tend to attach the names of people we greatly respect or who are seen as being particularly wise in order to give more heft to a quotation. In the secular world, it's often Mark Twain or George Bernard Shaw that get quoted, and I've actually seen quotations that are attributed to both guys at the same time. In the Christian world, it's usually somebody like Dwight Moody, Charles Spurgeon, John Wesley, when I was in the Salvation Army, General Booth, and basically quotations, by putting their name to it, it gives them an added authority, and I thought maybe that's what's happening here. So I did a little bit of research, but sure enough, it was Dwight Moody who said, "Lighthouses shine, they don't sound horns." Now, why would I be skeptical about that? Well, one of the reasons is I tend to be skeptical these days about anything on social media because there is so much being spread around that is not true. But the other reason is this, that actually Dwight Moody was wrong. Now, I recognize that Dwight L. Moody did so much for Jesus Christ, one of the greatest evangelists the Christian church has ever seen. Anything I have done or ever will do in my life is a pale shadow compared to the life of Dwight L. Moody. But nevertheless, he was wrong, because in his day, lighthouses did sound horns. In fact, every lighthouse was equipped with a foghorn. The reason being that whenever fog rolled in, ships at sea could not always see the light of the lighthouse. The light was to prevent the ships ending up on the rocks. So if the light was obscured by fog, the lighthouses would sound their foghorns. And this was true up till comparatively recently, at least in my own lifetime. There would be many places around Ireland until comparatively recently where you would hear foghorns sounding from lighthouses round the coast whenever it was too foggy for people to see the light. Now today that has ceased because of GPS, because every vessel at sea has a GPS system and they can see whether they're near the rocks or not, irrespective of whether there's a foghorn sounding or not. But the idea of the foghorn, so the fact, here's the thing, Moody is somebody that I would normally see as a reliable source, and yet even a great man of God like Dwight Moody still gets it wrong sometimes. And this is important because sometimes we pass things on from other people because we trust the source. Now, years ago, there was an excuse for that because we had no way of checking. Basically, if a preacher used an illustration, we had no way of knowing if that illustration was true or not. But if we didn't really trust the preacher, if we thought they were a dodgy character, we probably didn't use the illustration. But if we trusted the preacher, we would use their illustration. And yet, as we see, even Dwight Moody could get it wrong on occasion. Now, the Apostle Paul is somebody that I would look up to as an even more impeccable Christian character than Dwight Moody. And yet we're told in Acts chapter 17, verse 11, that whenever Paul and Silas arrived in Berea, it says, "Now the Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness, and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true." I would really, as a pastor, encourage the congregations that I speak to check what I say, to check, get the Bibles out, check, see, does the Bible really say that? Don't just take my word for it. check it out. That's not an insult. That is acting in a noble way. Well, thank God today we have resources where we can not just check scriptural things, but we can check facts that people present to us as well and say, well, is that really the truth? Is that statistic really true? And you know what? You discover actually that there are myths in the Christian church. One of them is the statistic that I've heard quoted by preachers so many times over the years that says the rate of divorce is exactly the same in the Christian church as it is in the world. And yet statistically, that is not true. But before, we had no way of checking up on that and asking whether it was true or not. Today, because of the information revolution, we do. And that means there's a great responsibility upon us, because the foghorn is relevant. Now, I've been told over the years that I have a voice like a foghorn. I can remember one time my wife and I were staying in a hotel out in the west of Ireland, and I went for my breakfast. It was a large breakfast room. I went to the other side of the room. I got my breakfast, came back, and when I sat down, my wife put this big voice on and said, "Have you got any more bacon?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I could hear you from the other side of the breakfast room. You've got a voice like a foghorn." Well, I guess I have. I'm an old-fashioned preacher, and I've got an old-fashioned preacher's voice. But can I say we need today to have voices like foghorns, because there is a fog of misinformation out and about, and we need to make sure that our voices are raised above above the fog, that our voices are raised as voices of truth. Now, that means several things. Number one, it means this, that we need to be very careful about what we repeat. There's been times when I've seen people repeat things in social media that are obviously not true. I mean, anyone that knows the first thing about science or church history or the Bible says, hang on, that's not true. And sometimes when you pull people up on this, they say, oh, well, I was just quoting somebody else. It wasn't my quotation. But here's the thing. Once you pass something on, it becomes yours. Doesn't matter who else says it to me. If I say it to other people, those are now my words. And we need to own our own words. And owning our own words means that we need to check that the words we speak are truthful. Because if we pass on stuff that is not truthful, then we have become untruthful and are spreading falsehoods, irrespective of whether we made up the lie ourselves or whether we are passing on a lie that somebody else invented. So we must check our own statements and make sure that they are truthful. And if we discover that they are not, to own that and admit that and apologize for that straight away. But the other thing is this. When we're surrounded by such a fog of misinformation, we need to make sure that our words of truth point people in a good direction. There are so many voices out there right now that are attempting to lead people astray. There are so many voices that are coming from political standpoints or whatever else, and sometimes they gain currency within the church. And it's so important that we, as the people of truth, keep speaking truth and pointing the word to Jesus Christ. Now that means I've got to be truthful in everything I say and do. Because if I spread something that is false in one area of life, why should people believe me when I start telling them that, for example, that Jesus is the only way to heaven, or that Jesus can heal? You know, if I prove to be untruthful in one area, why should people believe me in other areas? And so that's why I have to disagree with Dwight L. Moody. Lighthouses need to sound foghorns. Sometimes, Christians, you also have to have a voice like a foghorn. Check that what you say is true, and then speak truth and speak it boldly, and speak it unashamedly, and speak the truth of God that has the power to change situations and change people's lives. And at this time, more than ever, yes, it's important that we live lives of holiness and grace and love and let our light shine forth, but it's so important that we also boldly and loudly declare the truth. May God help us to do that in a way that will lead people to Jesus and will actually make a difference to their lives. As I believe that we will be able to do that. Why? Because it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming.